30th Nigerian Economic Summit, let's tell you that it also explored practical solutions that can bridge the digital gap and create a truly inclusive digital economy by focusing on access, inclusion, and shared benefits. Tapalabi reports on a session of the summit where stakeholders through conversations around digital inclusion and closing the accessibility gap.
Technology is transforming the world, with global digital economy worth $11.5 trillion, about 15.5% of world's overall GDP. With a population close to 200 million people, Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa, and one of its largest e-commerce markets could create jobs and capture a bigger share of the digital economy. NESG believes by enabling the public and private sectors to innovate and invest in digital skills, platforms, financial services, entrepreneurship, and infrastructure, Nigeria can build the blocks of a thriving digital economy.
It's really around how can talk about driving digital inclusion, both access to internet across rural areas, providing access across Nigeria. What do we need to really achieve scale? As you can see, it's a group of combination of government, private sector, players within the industry to try to advise government on the key action items that can be done to deliver and unlock potential for penetration of access to broadband across Nigeria.
There's a lot of opportunities using digital. So this is also going to be for the young, the youth, and then obviously it's industrialization. Do I think that we're where we used to be? I don't think so. I think we've actually revolved. We have different frameworks now that are being implemented. What is key is the enforcement of all of this kind of frameworks, and that it also allows us to have collaboration. It also allows for ownership. At the same time, it enables everybody to be able to see how we can descale all this risk, and then we can get better. My expectations in the digital world is truly to revolve, to get to the next level.
Because I don't know any country where digital transformation happened with only the public sector's drive, with only the public sector coming up with policies, with only the public sector financing much of the infrastructure and much of the support that needs to happen. And so a lot of the conversation here today was really about how do we enable private sector to participate in all the multiple layers that of development that needs to happen for digital transformation to be effective. What is the role of the public sector in enabling the private sector to support that? We always say public sector should be an enabler in a market economy, and private sector should take advantage of that enablement. And so talking in very concrete terms, should public sector be helping with de-risking finance so that private sector can be involved? What are the gaps in terms of infrastructure, and how can the private sector support the public sector's effort to build infrastructure? And of course, you heard a bit more about the social aspects of this, the digital literacy gap, the people in rural areas, people with disability, women, marginal economic actors, if you like. How do you enable them have access to the transformation that digital economy can bring? So that's really what the conversation has been about, and it's been less of a talk shop and more of very action-oriented, discussions. So we know the problems, we articulate some of the problems. Now, what can we do?
With 60 million Nigerians having no access to a formal bank account, stakeholders want the use of technology and policies to help the country close the accessibility gap.
Yeah, I think with the coordination with the NESG, I think, and the ministries, we will be able to get something, and then continuing the discussion even offline, apart from the session that we've had here, because the time we've had here is quite small. It has yielded a lot of brilliant ideas, but all those ideas need to be fine-tuned and then bring in some other stakeholders in order to get to workable plans that would really be implementable.
It's a conversation we really need to have, because the way the world is moving, Nigeria is a bit left behind considering our population. So if we don't start talking about digital inclusion, especially in rural areas, we will be left behind. And the way the world is moving, our money is turning electronic, almost everything is digital. We have to come on board both federal and state level to make sure there is inclusivity. Okay, so the expectation or outcome of this conversation is to come up with draft policy documents that can be passed on to the state and federal governments for adoption and possible legislation into law to make digital penetration easier in the country.
I think the discussion is about the fact that we are going there, we plan to go there, we want to go there because it is good for our economy that we do get there. And so this discussion is to not just generate interest, but to get everybody on board, both government, other key stakeholders, into forming the necessary policy and framework to ensure that we do get there, that we carry along our fellow citizens down to the grassroots, irrespective of where you're from or your level of education. We will come out with very concrete recommendations that are workable, that are implementable, and that everybody will move along into achieving their aspirations.
So when you plan for digital literacy, people tend never to think about persons with disabilities, youth with disabilities, and the different context of them being able to access. So even in the designs, like the very, very, very last point that was made of, I think it was Tracy that said it, you are busy designing things, but you are not taking along the community, the end user in it. So you create gaps, and because you've created gaps and you've designed something, you could just exclude them totally. And what we advocate for is you need to take everybody into consideration, leave no one behind. And the expectations are in the designs of any solution that would speak to digital upskilling or digital literacy. Make sure that persons with disability, their contexts are captured. And how do you do this? Just use the universal design principles of doing the digital scripting or scribing or the readiness that you do of platforms. If you do that, then you would leave no one behind. But we tend to forget that over here.
So I think that the good thing about NESG, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, is that they were established basically to drive things like this forward. And I have confidence in the organization that they're going to be able to take the recommendations that were raised by all of these stakeholders here, help put them into a clear action plan, and provide the support, the accountability, and maybe the convening that needs to happen for those to be put into action. Many stakeholders here said that they're eager to support, myself included. So I think that with the NESG convening and moving it forward, and with some serious intent from government, I'm optimistic that we'll be able to implement some changes.
While NESG seeks policies on digital inclusion and investments to be embedded in national priorities for a greater access and affordability, the conversation believes there should be a collective moral imperative to invest in each person's capacity for growth and opportunity. For Business 24, Tokpe Alabi.